Do you know that the legendary King Arthur might have never existed? That Camelot, Excalibur, and the Knights of the Round Table may be more fiction than fact? And yet, for over 1,500 years, people across the world have told and retold his tale, as if it was history set in stone. So what's the real story behind King Arthur? Was he a man of flesh and blood, or just Britain's greatest myth? Let's travel back through time, through misty legends, ancient scrolls, and battlefield echoes to uncover the truth. It begins in post-Roman Britain, somewhere around the 5th or 6th century AD. The Roman Empire had just collapsed. Britain was thrown into chaos. Gone were the legions, the roads, the laws. In their place came tribal warlords, Saxon invaders, a land divided by blood and fear. This is not the Britain of kings and castles, not yet. This is a land without a crown, no unifying banner, no strong central power. And from this darkness, the legend of a king would rise. King Arthur, the once and future king. He is said to have ruled from Camelot, wielded a magical sword called Excalibur, and led a band of noble knights to defend the weak and uphold chivalry. But here's where things get tricky. We have no solid historical record of King Arthur, no birth certificate, no confirmed tomb, no battle accounts written by Roman historians of the time. And yet, his name appears again and again across the centuries. In Welsh poems, in medieval chronicles, in French romances, but not as one version, as many: historian or hero, myth or memory. Let's start where the earliest pieces begin to surface. One of the first ever mentions of Arthur doesn't come from a history textbook. It comes from a warrior poem from around the year 600. It's called Y Gododdin, and it's Welsh. It tells of a brave soldier whose courage was so great, he fed black ravens on the walls of the fort, though he was no Arthur, no Arthur. That single line suggests something, that even by 600 AD, Arthur was already seen as the gold standard of heroism. But here's the shock. That line is the only real mention of Arthur that's even close to contemporary. There are no Roman records of him, no archaeological evidence. He seems to live not in history, but between legend and lyric. And yet, in the centuries that follow, his name grows louder. In 9th century texts, we see a monk named Nennius claim Arthur won 12 great battles, leading the Britons against the pagan Saxons. One of these battles, Mount Badon, is believed to have actually happened. Could it be? Was this Arthur real? Or were the monks and poets of the time blending real events with heroic fantasy to give Britain a national hero in its time of grief? That's where the conflict begins, not between kingdoms, but between truth and myth. Let's walk through Arthur's journey, not in legend, but in how he became legend. 6th century. In scraps of old Welsh poems, Arthur is a fierce warrior, not a king, not noble, just deadly. He rides into battle. He's tied to supernatural creatures. He's more like a folk hero than a ruler. 9th century Historia Brittonum by Nennius. Suddenly, Arthur becomes the leader of the Britons. He's said to have fought at 12 epic battles, ending in victory at Mount Badon, defeating the Saxons and uniting tribes. But Nennius never calls him a king. And again, no contemporary evidence. 12th century Geoffrey of Monmouth. This is the game changer. Geoffrey's Historia Regum Britanniae introduces Merlin, Arthur's magical advisor, Guinevere, his queen, and Mordred, his traitorous nephew. He gives Arthur a full origin story heir to Uther Pendragon, destined to wield Excalibur, lead from Camelot, and battle on behalf of justice and Christian values. But Geoffrey openly admitted parts were made up. He blended British myths, oral stories, and his own imagination to glorify Britain's past. Yet, this fictionalized kingdom soon became the foundation of all things Arthurian. 12th-15th century courtly evolution. Enter the French poets. Like Chrétien de Troyes, they add romance. The Holy Grail is introduced. Lancelot appears Arthur's greatest knight, torn by love for Queen Guinevere. And now we have the full picture. Knights of the Round Table, a noble court of chivalry, a tragic love triangle, a dying king carried to Avalon. Nearly nothing of this can be historically verified, and yet it took over the Western imagination. And here's what makes the Arthurian legend timeless. Though we question its truth, we believe its emotion. The tale of a king who rises in dark times, who gathers broken tribes, who trusts his friends, and is betrayed by them. It's a human story, one of love, glory, heartbreak, sacrifice, and, ultimately, tragedy. Think of Lancelot torn between duty and forbidden love, of Guinevere bound by loyalty to her king, but drawn to his knight, of Mordred a son or nephew, depending on the version, who brings the kingdom to its knees. And Arthur? He's not just a warrior, he's a dreamer. A man burdened with idealism. In his round table, it wasn't just furniture, it symbolized equality. A place where no knight sat higher than another, a seat for every voice, a council of justice in an age of war. Even today, in courtrooms, councils, and stories, round tables still echo his vision. With time, Arthur grew even more powerful, not in life, but in death. By the 1200s, King Arthur wasn't just a tale, he was a political symbol. English kings claimed descent from Arthur to validate their rule, especially when facing French resistance. In 1191, monks at Glastonbury Abbey claimed to have found Arthur's grave bones laid beside a woman marked Guinevere. Was it real? Experts now believe it was a hoax, a clever trick to attract pilgrimages and funds. During WWI, Hitler even sent archaeologists to look for Arthurian relics, hoping to uncover a Germanic connection to the Holy Grail. Arthur remained not buried, but resurrected, over and over again. And in 1981, a new generation discovered him again through Excalibur, the film. Then King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, The Mists of Avalon, BBC's Merlin, and more. Even now, modern historians still debate. Was Arthur real? A war leader? A composite character? A myth created for hope? Whatever the answer, he continues to ride in our imaginations. So maybe Arthur never drew a sword from a stone. Maybe there was no Camelot, no Merlin, no Grail. But there was a time of chaos, a land in need of heroes, a people craving unity, justice, and hope. Out of that need, Arthur was born. We may never find his bones, but his spirit, it lives on in every story of loyalty, courage, love, and loss. Perhaps that's his true legacy. Not history, but inspiration. Because legends live forever. Thanks for joining us in uncovering the real story behind King Arthur. If you enjoyed this journey into truth, myth,